All right, we are now almost at 5 o'clock in Central Europe. We are ready to start our webinar on taking your creative startup to the US, to the United States of America. And I will do a little bit of small talk here until we get everyone in for this webinar where we involve Jens Andersen and Ken Madison from SuperVenio and a bunch of other interesting speakers, as well as a couple of darn interesting listeners I can see here. So I'm hoping for a very interactive webinar on taking your creative startup to the US. Meanwhile, or when you haven't, and if you can't get enough of what we're talking about, go to cbnet.com, that's cbnet.com. If you want to join our community, it's at thisis.cbnet.com. So this is www.thisis.cbnet.com. That's our community that we will allow you into, unless you're a complete moron, which I doubt you are, and then you are eligible. You can get into the community where you can access our academies. You can find what we do with investors. You can find pretty much everything we work on and the people that we collaborate with on it in the community. So go to thisis.cbnet.com and you are then part of the community. I can see we have some participants from our Creative Business Academy, Europe and Africa as the participants. We're right now running a 30-hour academy for startups from Africa and Europe. It's 30 hours focusing on business development through internationalization, very much related to this subject. So how can you develop your business while internationalizing, while going to other markets, either by setting up your business there, or by selling there, or by having your suppliers from there, or recruiting great, talented people from there. Those are the possibilities when you work with internationalization. Let's see here. I think we're about everyone there. So the usual house rules is that this session will be recorded and we will use it against you if you don't say no. And even if you say no, we will still record it. And we might use bits of it in the future when we do other academies or other sessions, etc. Also, if you're not speaking, I would recommend that you turn off your microphone, you mute yourself. That is a good way to avoid the birds chirping and the cats meowing and the dogs barking in the background. So, so turn your mic on mute. Also, turn on your camera. You look fantastic, all of you. And you are amazing and you are loved and all that. So don't be shy. Turn on your camera so we can see who you are. Even you, Daniela. Oh, yeah, you are there. Good. I thought you turned your Daniela into a D because, and Amy, you're also good from the back and your dogs look fantastic. So I think we're ready to start up. Now I've been threading water, as we say in Denmark, you know, trying to stay afloat while not moving anywhere. So we are ready to taking your creative startups to the US. And I would like to introduce our ones we're collaborating with on this. The co-founder of SuperVenio, that's a super friend, if we have to translate that, and that's Jens Andersen. He has enjoyed strategic advisory and consultancy roles for foreign and local companies and innovation centers from the US, Canada, Denmark, Greece, Japan, Taiwan, India, and China, including but not limited to setting up US operations, beachheads, raising capital from local and foreign investors, and bringing products to market in the US, Asia, and Europe. That's Jens Andersen for you. Then we have Kenneth Madison. Kenneth Madison is a startup survivor, and I guess he's also a CBC survivor. Kenneth Madison participated in the Creative Business Cup 2015 in the Danish round, and also have been part of the Creative Business Network since 2015. He's a startup survivor and a UX designer, and also part of SuperVenio. He writes, "It's hard. I work hard to develop myself and the people around me. I'm a Scandinavian techie dad." I suppose his children are not made out of tech, engineer and design enthusiast. We live in a fast-paced world where developments happen twice as fast this year compared to last year. This will inevitably revolutionize everything from export markets to media companies. I am a strong believer in disruptive innovation, exponential organizations, and leveraging exponential technologies with a rockstar team that have a deep passion for what they are doing. You found the right people here, Kenneth. So I would like to start out with just a few, asking Jens and Kenneth to give a couple of comments on their background, in additional to what we have said here, and what we can expect from the webinar today, and what will you bring to the table. Let's start out with Jens. What are some of the main challenges a startup faces when moving to the US?
Yeah, hi everybody again. It's great to see everybody at this meeting here. The US is an interesting market. It's a huge market, so everybody wants to come here. And when we get here, it's really hard to leave again. So some of the challenges, again, that I have faced over the years, initially coming in, was just to adapt into such a big market space. And Lane will talk about this later on as well in terms of building your networks. But that is one of the most crucial things that you have to do here. That's very different from coming from Denmark, where I came from originally, where you do build networks, but you have to survive on it in the US. One of the things that we have done significantly, I would say many times in our careers within the US, is to take companies up and really trying to present them on a much broader scale than where they came from. And whether it's been a 1-person company or 10-person company, they all go through the same, or 100-person company for that matter, they all go through the same processes to get the recognition, being planted correctly, and really work that network as you go through the process.
But for a Danish startup, the challenges facing the US, wouldn't it just be easier to take on the German market with 80 million people? Wouldn't that be, are there certain advantages of taking on the US market before other markets?
Sure, absolutely. It's easier. However, you got 300 million people right here at the door all the time, right? You get in, you're in. It's its own continent. It's very well surrounded. A lot of opportunities. You got the investors down the street, you got your market down the street. So whenever you landing in Chicago or in New York or San Francisco, you got a huge market right in your backyard. It is very, very easy accessible.
So you simply have more opportunities if you locate to the US. It's true, it's a big market, but isn't it also very heterogeneous? Isn't it very different doing business in the Midwest and doing business in the East Coast or West Coast? And other areas, just like in Jutland, where they don't use VAT, do you have that also in the US?
So yeah, I mean, each state is different to begin with. I mean, you have income taxes are different in some states. You have, some of them don't have, federal taxes on corporations. You incorporate, for instance, in Delaware versus San Francisco, or California, very different. But at the end of the day, it's, there are a lot of similarities. What's important in the US is to get to know each other, and who do you know makes a big difference. Build your relationships. It's crucial over here, and you do need to survive on that. So it's funny, many times, I mean, I have had stories where we go into a meeting, and as Danes, we are pretty much straight out of the bucket and asking for the order, and it takes a little bit more time here. So those are some of the big differences, and culturally we can talk about that later on in this webinar. But culturally, there are big differences between us.
Mm-hmm. Kenneth or Ken, last time I met you, we had dinner together in the basement of Innovay, which is the largest incubator in Beijing. Yeah, maybe you can't remember that, but it was. I don't know why they put the restaurant in the basement, but strange things happen in China. Now, so you've been working with investors both in China and in the US. I'm not gonna ask you to who do you prefer, but what are some of the differences? What is the key to survival working with investors in the US? I know that you've also been, led down dark alleys and
Literally.
blindfolded before you were able to enter a door, and stuff like that. But
Yeah, so you're completely right. I mean, there are some similarities. Like there's different hoops you have to jump through. In China, it's very let's say that there's a formal etiquette that you have to follow at business dinners, at business meetings. It's very described in literature how to perform over there. But in the US, it's a lot more intuitively how you grow your networks with the different people. But the key thing I would say is to have respect for other people's time and for your own time. Like, spend your time wisely. As a startup, time is of the essence for you, and all the money you have in the bank goes to buying time to getting to the next stage, and being able to show that to the investors that you approach, that you're not wasting your time, you're not wasting their time, you're not a pre-seed company trying to approach a Series A, B investor. You put yourself into what the mentality of the investors is in the US, and what each investor is looking for, and then you go specifically for those people. You show respect for their time, for your own, and at the end of the day, that's
Hi, Umar. It's great to know that you have kids, but you need to mute your microphone, Umar.
Yes, thank you. Sorry.
There we go. Sorry, on behalf of Umar. And I was a bit thrown off there, Ken. Actually, you say not wasting the investor's time, and does that mean getting to the point? Is it true that you always should have your elevator speech or pitch ready at any time, and you should be sure that you can do it in 1 minute and in 3 minutes?
The time is, I've always had a mixed approach to these competitions, Rasmus, and I know that's the whole foundation of where you guys started out with the Creative Business Club.
It used to be.
Yeah, but the end product up on stage, timing something to 90 seconds is not always going to be the right thing. It's much more about being able to clearly tell enthusiastically, in the US specifically, enthusiastically, I want to put a line under that, what it is that you're trying to do, how you're trying to do it. And if you can wrap all of that up in a small sound bite that you can remember within 3 seconds, then you're already ahead of the pack when you're talking to people in the US. Because there's investors everywhere. Everybody has a startup. The joke in the US is that the only difference between a guy living on the street and a founder of a startup is what you tell people you do. So everybody has a startup. Everybody knows somebody that's an investor, and that feeds back into the network that you have to do. So the elevator pitch, yes, have it ready, but more importantly, be ready to network wherever you are. That opens doors so quickly. It's incredible.
Both Jens and Ken, Depeche Mode had a hit many years ago called "People Are People." And are people in the US also just people? Is there a US mentality? Is there a US investor mentality as such? Or isn't it really, as you say, you should really try and figure out who are they and what do they do, and what's, that it should be actually, you should be seeing a person in front of you and not an American.
It's funny. I mean, people are people. And again, Depeche Mode, I'm a fan, always was and always will be. Ken and I were talking about this the other day, and it was funny because, landing in the US, I remember that landing, and I think everybody that has come from somewhere, they land somewhere. You walk on the street, and as you're walking down the street, you say, hello to somebody, and they say, how are you doing, right? And as a Dane, we're stopping, thinking, and trying to tell them how we're doing, but they're gone, right? So point of that is, you get in front of an investor in the US, use your time correctly. Make sure you say what you're coming here for, what you're trying to, what your objective is, and what you're expecting out of it before you leave again, because you get that one chance, and then you don't get invited in unless there's a significant interest. So people are people, absolutely, but there's distinct differences for sure.
there is a way of being an American investor and American startups. I remember working with a UK startup. It had been going for a while, and maybe we can talk a bit about US work mentality, efficiency or inefficiency. I remember, in Denmark, if you get your job done, you're out of there, at 4 o'clock or whenever. But we're in the UK, it was so strange. The staff was just hanging around until the founder left. So when the CEO left and the founder left, then everyone else could leave. So if he was hanging around until 7, they would hang around, which I thought was completely stupid. So is there a certain, maybe one thing, what is the perception of American startups and work ethics, and what is the reality of American startups and work ethics?
So, from my experience, it's you're always working in the US. There's no such thing as leaving at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock for that matter.
Why, if you got your job done?
Say that again?
If you got your job done, why would you stay?
That's just what you do. It's it's not looked upon well if you leave before the CEO, as an example. And again, the CEO is usually the one that comes first and leaves last, especially in startup. I mean, you gotta be on it. So but the thing about startups in the US that I found is always been amazing. People are so darn dedicated to it. Now, is it always effective and efficient? Now, that's a different question. I know, we can talk about efficiency in many different ways, but definitely you are always on. I remember one thing in the US from a human resources perspective, we all at will, which means that there's no long-term contracts. I mean, you let go for no reasons, right? It's a big thing in the US. So people take that to heart, and you work differently for that reason alone. Maybe
you make more shortcuts because you want to receive results quicker than if you were working, if you knew that you had at least a month of employment and you didn't have to leave your home and because live on the street if you were fired. So is it so that do people use the tools? Are they efficient? I'm thinking also, I'm still thinking if some of my staff, they can get their job done in less time than I would expect, then by no means I'm not going to pile on more on them. If they're good at using HubSpot and the templates and the automatizations and all these things, all the digital offers that we have on hand, why should they stay? Why should they stay until 7?
Well, good question. A good analogy. You're in sales. You come in with the best order of the year. The first thing you ask is, okay, what's next? That's not the thing. Go on vacation, right? Yeah. Now, let's not be black and white. I mean, of course, you have a lot of good benefits and such over here as well. But if you're especially in a startup, it's you're dedicated. You want to get the job done, and you want to do more.
I just would like to remind my staff that it's possible to actually make sure that whenever someone enters this webinar, that they will be muted automatically. So people, when they arrive, they are muted automatically. That is an option in Zoom, because I see we are getting some people in that are surprised by the noise that they're creating around them. And that's quite okay if they have a good question. I would actually like to quickly run a Mentimeter to find out who's actually with us here. I believe, Eduardo, you have a Mentimeter ready for us. So you guys, if you don't know what a Mentimeter is, Eduardo, you can just go ahead while I talk.
Yes.
You need to grab your smartphone or open another browser and write menti.com. That's MENTI. So menti.com. And then you need to enter a code 1292354. So go to menti.com and use the code 1292354. Let me also do the same.
Yes, you should be now able to see the screen. So the first question for you all is, which country are you from? If you have Sweden and Denmark, so the Nordics. Let's see.
Yeah, hang on there. Which country? What should I say? Burkina Faso, the former Upper Volta? No. I come from
Denmark, but also Israel. And then Peru, the United States, of course. Yeah.
The Kingdom of Bornholm. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I
I
see
know
people from.
most of my family actually live on Hawaii, and 4 years ago, in November 4 years ago, my cousins wrote me that they actually would prefer that Hawaii became a kingdom again. You all know King Kamehameha. He was the last king, and his wife Queen Kaahumanu. They were quite successful and quite popular. Maybe they would go back to that. Anyway.
Okay,
next
I think we
question.
can move to the next question, which is, who do you represent? A startup, a small, medium enterprise, or are you a private professional? So I'd say startups are mostly represented here. And let's go more into the topic with the next question. So what is the biggest thing you are struggling with right now?
Is it okay to say my weight because of lockdown and comfort eating during the Corona crisis?
So first of all, culture, funding. Of course, there are many challenges, and even more if you move your startup elsewhere. Marketing message, leadership. Let's see if we have other issues. Seed capital, and reaching customer remotely.
You grouped them a bit. Some seed capital, funding and financing, F2F. Someone needs to elaborate on that. I don't know that abbreviation. I'm a stupid blonde sometimes.
Okay, that was my little thing. Face-to-face meetings.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Cool.
And then financing again. So
planning 2021. Yes. What are we going to do in 2021? I will hug and kiss a lot of people. So watch out when you're getting close to me.
Was that a promise or a threat, Rasmus?
It was both for you, Ken.
Well, I suggest to move to the last question.
Yes.
So did you market your product in the US already?
So these questions are really good for us who are planning these and future webinars, and also very good for the next speaker. And I will, as we are getting, thank you very much, Eduardo, for this. Now we know who you are and what you're doing. The next speaker, I know that Ken will be moderating it. Will you also be presenting, or should I do that?
I am happy to jump in there, Rasmus.
Go for it.
I have had the pleasure of our next speaker at several both online meetings and face-to-faces, last of which in the marvelous city of Las Vegas, New York. What's the state called, Johan? Nevada? Where is it?
Illinois.
All right. So I last met Johan in Las Vegas. I know that he will tell you that he's not much of an entertainer, but give him a sales floor at a conference show, and he will entertain the crowds until the cows come in. Johan represents a company called Retail Bound in the US, a company helping companies, startups and established companies bring their products into the market, into the big box retail stores all across America and Canada. And here to tell you all about it, we have the man himself, Johan.
Thanks, Ken. Hey guys, how's it going? All right, so I'm gonna do a couple of things. I'll do this a lot here. I'm gonna take my face off for a moment here. I'm gonna share my screen. Here we go. And share. Come on. There we go. Cool. Hope you guys can see my screen here. I'm gonna make this a little smaller. There we go. And we are good to go. Cool. So Ken invited me here. I appreciate it. I do about 8 to 12 of these a year. Typically it lasts like an hour to 2 hours. I get 15 minutes. I'll do my best to keep it within the time frame that Ken has told me to stay within. So today's agenda, real quick, give a little introduction of what I actually do at Retail Bound. Really 2 topics. Why is retail important to a product startup, especially with COVID, right? Being a global pandemic, a lot of startups have a little like, why should I do it, right? And then also getting the retail buyer's attention. Buyers are challenging to get, especially this time when buyers are working from home, not in the corporate office. So how do you get the buyer's attention for your product startup? And if you have any questions, I know Ken will probably moderate. I'll be happy to answer them. So real quick, 2 seconds about me. I'm doing this for almost nearly 30 years. I started my career as a manufacturer like you guys, pioneering products about retailers and distributors in the US. Probably made more of my fair share of mistakes because I didn't have a retail bound kind of leading me or kind of give me some good advice. I was a large retail buyer buying millions of dollars of products from various brands all around the world. I've done both B2C as well as B2B merchandising, and my company Retail Bound, since 2008, our team has consulted, mentored, and educated over 4,000 startups around the world. So really, for retail, and of course I get asked a lot lately is, why should I pursue retail? I'm on Amazon, I'm on my own website. Why should I pursue retail? Would it be brick and mortar, online, catalog, TV response, or B2B? One, retail can give you a sense of legitimacy, right? It's like I have a name on your resume, like a Best Buy or a Costco or a Walmart, right? Definitely, thanks to COVID, retailers have definitely upped their omnichannel game. So retailers in the US, like Best Buy, like Home Depot, have definitely improved their mobile as well as their e-com checkout to kind of assist with their brick and mortar operations. Well, online sales have been growing, as you've seen in the news, by triple digits, right? There are other verticals in retail that have been pretty strong for product brands. One being TV response, like QVC or HSN. In fact, last night, one of my clients was on HSN and did very well. Also, catalog. It's hard to believe that in the year 2020, there are still people who shop by catalog, but those 2 areas have not really affected like a physical brick and mortar retailer. So yeah, these are 2 areas that have been growing really strong in addition to online retail.
I really miss the Sears catalog. I remember,
yeah, the wish
got
book,
Christmas presents and all that from Sears.
Yes. I actually was a merchant at Sears Holdings for many years, and I joined the company right after they got rid of that big book. And then finally, a lot of young brands, a lot of customers like myself, like buying products from startups at name retailer, whether it's Amazon or Best Buy or Sears, because we know that if by chance there's an issue with the product, it's easy to return the product back to where we got it from versus trying to ship it to a brand in Denmark or in China or in Tel Aviv. And finally, and I can tell you because I do this every day, retailers are looking for products to fill their shelves. But I'll see during the spring with COVID, retailers focus on essentials like hand sanitizer or face masks. Right now, there are several categories doing very well, like work from home, eat from home, play at home. If you make product in those kind of categories, there are definitely retailers who are interested in talking to you. Now, when I do these kind of webinars, I always kind of ask, well, how do you find retail buyers and kind of get people's, answers, right? Being I have a short time to talk, I'll kind of give you those answers for you. So networking, that's definitely important, especially, before COVID or during or after COVID. Networking is one of the best ways of finding the right retail buyers to talk to, where it be LinkedIn, right? Where it be finding other manufacturers, small or large, to help you with a warm referral. maybe some strict alliances, like the Creative Business Network, and so forth. Inbound, great way. So, paid search and PR, email, opt-in email campaigns, inquiries. When I was a retail buyer, I would find, I would reach out to many young brands, from ads they put in trade publications, or what I heard on the radio or on TV. Trade shows. Honestly, this year has been very interesting when it comes to trade shows. When I was at the Consumer Electronics Show this past January, now there were some hints that shows like the Hauser Show in Chicago would be canceled. Like, there's no way they'll cancel a major trade show like the Hauser Show. Yep, they canceled that show, as well as dozens of other trade shows that brands like yours would attend. For right now, at least for the next few months, there'll be a lot more virtual trade shows. One of our clients in Switzerland attended a virtual trade show called the ABC Kids Expo this past fall, and did very well. It would have been better in person, but for the circumstances, we got some quality leads to help continue the conversation. When I was a manufacturer back in the 90s, early 90s, not to date myself, there was no thing as called the internet or Google. So what I used was a directory called the Chain Store Guide. These are directories that are updated every other year with various retailers and some information how to contact them. There are other services like range.me that are let's call it a global directory like Alibaba, where you can post your product or your product catalog, where buyers can search for you. So this is another way. And then finally, if you don't have the time or experience to contact retail buyers, then you hire a retail guru like Retail Bound to be your North American, marketing and sales team. Now, retail buyers, they're a busy crew. Now, my wife thought all I did was play golf and have lunch with my vendors. Wrong, right? Retail buyers are very, very busy. My biggest line did over $850 million US. That's the size of a mid-sized company. It's one of the few jobs in corporate retail where the buyer affects every department at corporate. So I affected international sourcing, IT, visual merchandising, in-store marketing, other buying teams. Buyers are very spreadsheet literate, as well as PowerPoint wizards. They're writing a lot of reports. By the way, another free tip: never cold call or reach out to a buyer on Mondays. Why? Because they're busy running reports for their senior leaders on how sales were over the weekend. Same thing, you don't want to call a buyer Friday afternoons. That's when they kind of sneak out of the office, especially in the summertime here in the States. But again, buyers are very busy running their business. But this slide I want to show you that buyers aren't just sitting there at their desk waiting for you to call them. They got a lot of things on their plate. So as a retail buyer, there's a lot of things we look at before we say yes to your product. We look at, is there a demand? Honestly, looking at like, the COVID, right? The UV lights, the face masks, the sanitizers, right? Here's a demand out there for your entire product, right? Market trends. Is COVID going to be a short term or long term? My gut's telling me I'll probably be more of a short term by next fall. Hopefully we've overcome this. I've told some potential clients to kind of be careful. If you do, I wouldn't invest in a lot of these UV lights, other like products, because I think there's a lot of competition, and then I think it's a short-term game. Store policies. Some retailers can't buy certain products because of the policies. When I bought video games, one of the many categories, we couldn't sell M-rated games. M-rated games are the most popular with gamers, and my store wouldn't let me sell M-rated games. So I lost at least half of my potential sales that I didn't offer that particular product in my store. And finally, like you and I, we have our own checkbook right? We have money coming in, money going out. Well, there's no unlimited checkbook for retail buyers. We have a budget. It's called open to buy. So we gotta stay on budget. If we buy too much this year, we gotta cut back our budgets for next year. But at the end of the day, as a retail buyer, right? They want to beat their competition. They want to drive traffic to the store. If your product can drive top line sales, bottom line profits, and can turn X number of times in their stores, they'll be happy to talk to you. And again, one of my favorite tips I like to offer to young brands is make the buyer's job easier. I can't tell as a buyer who worked with countless number of brands, from established brands like Sony and Samsung to startups like Play Dexter that Ken worked for, right? That make my job easier, right? I guarantee you'll get additional opportunities like more shelf space, maybe free marketing vehicles, right? And become a long-term partner. So if there's one tip from this little 10-minute, 15-minute webinar you want to write down, is make the retail buyer's job easier. You do that, I guarantee you'll have success. Now, when I talk to young brands, they ask, well, maybe should I cold call? Should I cold email if I don't have a partner like a Retail Bound, or I'm not good at networking, right? So there's definitely advantages as well as disadvantages of both, right? With cold calling, who likes to do it, right? It's not fun. It's tedious, right? The advantage is you can find out if there is opportunities, for your brand to be in store next year. With emails, it's easy to get a list of email of buyers, and not say spam, but it's not a lot of emails out there. The downside is if I know who you are, if I'm expecting your email, I'm probably going to delete it. As a business owner of a global retail consulting agency, I get over 200 emails a week, right? Delete, right? Honestly, this next question is kind of leading, right? Which one has a higher success of contact rate, right? Typically, and just before COVID, right? Typically, the cold call has a higher percentage of success, right? The reason why is because this way, if I call first and then email afterwards, right, with more information, I'm more likely to get a future me. I call that 1-2 punch. When I was a manufacturer back in the 90s, I used to send a lot of unsolicited samples. I'm like, wow, I'm sending a free sample to a buyer. He or she should be pleased to get a free sample from me, right? Wrong. It's like a cold email. I got a very low response rate on the number of samples I sent out for free without being asked for. When I became a large buyer, when I came to the other side of the buyer's desk, I'm like, where are these samples coming from? I didn't ask for this. Most likely, I threw it away. I gave it away. I didn't look at it. What a waste of money. If you have money to burn to send us samples, give it to me and Ken. We have young kids. Give it to me and Ken. We're happy to spend your money. Don't send samples unless specifically asked for. If you do decide to call a retail buyer, right? Some roadblocks. Also, you got gatekeepers, people like an admin or an assistant buyer, assistant buyer. That is their form of defense, right? Or voicemail, right? That's another roadblock. If you do get a voicemail, don't leave a message. Try again. Because I can tell you, it's like a cold email. Buyers rarely return voicemails from people they don't know of, right? When you do a cold call to a retail buyer, the purpose of the phone call is not to get an order or to get a sale. The purpose of the cold call is to schedule another call or a meeting. Because remember, the buyer's not expecting your call, right? Maybe they're going to a meeting in 10 minutes, right? The purpose of this call, which is usually a couple minutes, is to really get a taste of who you are, right? A glimpse of who you are, and an opportunity to have another discussion later on down the road. So the pitch you want to have is very important. One is if you do cold call a buyer, right? Tell them who you are. My name's Ken. I work at Play Dexter, right? Who are you? Well, we make this really cool STEM product, right? I think your demographic would love this product, right? More importantly, this is something you definitely want to make sure you have your notes. Ask if this is a good time to talk. I can't tell you as a retail buyer 100 times I pick up the phone. Hello, this is Johan. Can I help you? And all of a sudden, I have Ken going through his sales pitch. Wait a second. I got like 5 minutes and I got to go out to lunch, right? So always ask before you do your pitch, is this a good time to talk? If not, say, okay, I totally understand. I'll call you back some other time or call you when it's appropriate, right? Give a reason why you're calling, right? Well, we're a plate duck star. We're up and coming product, a brand in Denmark. We're launching here. You're launching in the U.S. In Q1 of 2021, and we thought Barnes & Noble would be a great retailer to work with, right? And that's one of the phrases I would use, right? Another one is, hey, we've been Amazon for the last 6 months. We have over 300 verified 4 or 5 star reviews, and now we're looking again to brick and mortar retail. And if considered Target is one of the key retailers to work with, right? So these are some possible point making phrases to use when talking to a retail buyer. Now, by the way, most buyers. Yes, Ken.
Just quickly in here. There's obvious there's a lot of pitfalls here from calling at the right time of day to calling the right time of week to calling too early in the budgeting process or too late in the budgeting process. So it's obviously a minefield for the poor companies out there. I wanna quickly try one of the questions from the audience, Johan, before we have to move on. So if you have like a punchline that you want to send people off with, let's try and hit that, and then wrap it up with a question from Sandy from the audience. Would that be all right with you?
Sure. Yeah, you tell me. So I would say that if I was quickly go through the slides here, I say that that if you are reaching out to retail buyers, right, make sure you use common sense, right? Make sure you keep the small talk brief. Make sure you listen carefully, but close a sale, right? That's the goal. But again, if you're talking to retail buyers in the U.S., you want to be prepared. You want to make the buyer job easier. And if the retail buyer has some requests, follow through, right? If they want looking for a sample or a price list or a sales sheet, make sure you follow through on your commitments.
Perfect, Johan. So just another question just came in as well. So let's try and answer them as good as we can. So the first one here is from Sandy, who's asking about advice on selling products that might not be high volume products, but African arts, crafts, and collectibles. How would you go about accessing retail when it's not a high volume game? Can you elaborate a bit on that?
So good question. So also you gotta identify the right retailers, right? So so if your product is a niche product and you have the resources to mass produce, you gotta find retailers that make sense. So maybe it's not the big guys like a Target or a Walmart. Maybe it's more of an independent or a smaller retailer that would be the right target for your brand or your company.
So that's again where the network comes in, right? Knowing who to access in the market instead of wasting, that precious time that a retail buyer has, if your product is not a fit for the brand or for the store. So that's another upside of talking to a gentleman like yourself here to help open the right doors, because they are there, right?
Yeah, for young brands we work with, the first 30 days, and this we did with your company, Ken, is we develop a go-to-market strategy. Look at various things. Hey, is this retailer the right brand? Would Best Buy be a better fit than Walmart? Two ends of the spectrum, right? Can a retailer pay us? No offense, love to work with XY retail, but if they can't pay my invoice, why work with them? So we do a lot of things helping get young brands internationally prepared to work with U.S. retailers.
Perfect. So I think that actually answered the second question as well in terms of whether or not it's truly a volumes game going into retail. So I would wrap it up. I saw another question coming in, but we can share that afterwards, Johan. And remember, guys, that we are happy to set up connections as well to the speakers. So so if there's something you want to talk more in detail, I know Johan is a wealth of information on that. And talking about wealth of information, it's time to head it over to Mr. Jens Andersen and Lene Sjørslev, two of the Grand Danes in San Francisco.
Yeah, hey,
And you
thanks.
didn't say old,
Dylan.
Ken.
So let me just start off here introducing Lene. Lene, we have known each other for quite a long time, since I think 2006, 2007, when I first visited the Innovation Center from Denmark that you co-founded and helped set up, along with many other things. So today, Lene is, of course, based here in the US, in San Francisco, and she is running all of the US-based activities for a really cool internet provider, global internet provider company called Bluetown. And you know, over the years, she's done a tremendous amount of work building partnerships and you know, working with some of the biggest tech companies in the world. I met Lene when she was at the Silicon Valley Innovation kind of like group that she was building for Denmark here in Palo Alto. And she did a lot of fantastic work for them, built a really cool program called Scale It, and been with many other, I would say, innovation platforms since then that has grown into to companies that have been acquired by Deloitte and others. So, and even more cool, I think, about Lene, she's also teaching courses, you know, here about entrepreneurship, Silicon Valley, and innovation. So I think we got a good person to really ask a lot of great questions to. So welcome, Lene.
Thank you, Jens. I'll do my best.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things obviously for us to talk about here is coming to the United States. This topic today, you move to the United States. It is a big country, but you know, setting up what is really needed here for a startup or for any company for that matter.
Yeah. So yeah, setting up, I think that, and also in this discussion, we are often talking about sort of coming here, right? Like getting started here. And as you said, that I've spent a lot of time working with companies from outside Silicon Valley that want to come here and be present here. So I feel that's sort of where I can be speaking from and where I have a lot of experience and where I believe and assume that the audience is also coming from. So that's going to be my intention here, but correct me if I'm wrong. And yeah, I think the number one thing is to commit to coming here. And it sounds pretty standard thing that of course you'll commit, but it's just not always the case. I've seen so many companies that believe that the US can be sort of just another country that we enter. And I don't think that's the right way to approach it if you want to be successful in the US. You have to commit to be here. The bar is extremely high. It's going to be hard work that will make you successful. The other thing I've heard so many times is that, or people that have asked me that if I can help them find this one person, like one distributor or something who can just take their product, sell it to millions and make them rich. And again, I haven't found that person yet. I know, Jens, that you are working on some of these things. And I know that, of course, there are people that can help guide you and help you in this process. But if you are not fully committed to also being present and also taking the steps that are necessary, then you're just not going to be successful with it.
And that's just really, really interesting. So when you say commitment, what are we talking about? I mean, I know, you know, we've been doing this for a long time and helping so many companies land on their feet, you know, a lot of good ones and a few that didn't do it so well. But so commitment becomes an interesting, is it like a part-time job? Do people need to move here? Do you need to hire some super experts? What does that really mean?
Yeah, but it can mean different things, right? Like, as you say, like you can definitely get people involved that are here that can help you in that process. But I think it's about supporting them as much as possible and in many ways. And moving here, well, maybe not necessarily that you as a founder move here, but it's important that you are present. And investors and probably also early customers want to meet the founder of that company. They want to see who is behind it. They want to, if they are to invest in you, you have to invest in them, and you have to be present and sometimes available when they are accessible. And that can mean, again, I've seen many times that some of the more successful companies over here, that they sort of pretend that they are present here. Maybe they don't live here full time, but they come here often. They have almost like a set schedule for when they're here. And what they'll do is they'll, if there's a meeting they're supposed to have, they'll just say, you know what, I'm a little bit busy, or I'm traveling this week. Can we meet next week? And sometimes you already had a trip planned, and if it's a really important meeting, maybe you will actually then plan a trip, right? So it's a little bit more fluid. Is that, do you live here permanently from the day you set up? That's not necessarily it, but you definitely have to be flexible.
Yeah. So basically, you need people on the ground. That's always important, and you need people on the ground that you can say they're dedicated to you. So not a part-time worker that can help you on certain times. That leads to another question. We kind of briefly touched upon this initially. Networking, in the US versus what we have grown up with, for instance, in Denmark. How important is networking and building rapport and such here?
Yeah. Well, I think I can say that, and you said that I also teach entrepreneurship, and it's one of the things that I probably spend the most time with my students who are also coming internationally. The students I teach are often from France or Africa as well. But networking is everything here. It's not about who you are, it's about who you know. And that's the way Silicon Valley works. And I heard, it was interesting, I think it was you, Ken, that talked about earlier how, or one of you talked about how in Denmark, you do your work and you go home. And that mentality is not really a thing here in Silicon Valley, right? Because work is often being done at times when you don't sort of consider yourself formally at work, right? Because networking is part of your job. And it's something that you have to proactively do in order to be successful here. So definitely it's everything. But I think I can say that you're also lucky in that sense here, that it's also part of the mindset of being here, right? People are willing to help you. We have this term called paying it forward, at least here in Silicon Valley. I think it may be a broader US thing as well, but that you can actually ask people to help you and to be introduced to new people and sort of start. I always think of it as an analogy of this onion, where you're sort of peeling layers off to get to the person that you want to eventually get to, or the people. So it's sort of a process to build that network. It's going to take a long time, and again, commitment. But I think you're lucky in that it may be one of the easiest places to do so in the world, being here in the US, because people are so open to having conversations and helping you, and everybody, and people generally want you to succeed and be part of that as well.
Yeah, and that is super exciting. So I mean, we have learned that, and again, we're out all the time, so it just becomes our life. The last thing that we only have a few minutes here, but what would you have done differently? Because I mean, we have learned a lot since I remember the first time I put my feet on. It was a long time ago. I'm not going to mention the year. Just tell you how old I am. But what would you have done differently, of what you have learned over the years here that could speed up the process that other people can help from when they land for the first time, if anything?
What would I've done differently? So I was maybe a little bit in a unique position, because actually one thing I would maybe have done differently for my sake was to jump in and become that entrepreneur that I have become over the years, or maybe always been. But as you said, I started out working actually many years for the government, and it always frustrated me, because I felt I was like everybody here, and I wanted to move with their speed, and I wanted to be innovative in that way, which was sometimes hard in a setting working for a government. So I think that is definitely one thing, is that I should have jumped into that that ship a little bit earlier. But if I think about Scale It as a startup, as I definitely did, it was my baby, or me and my good colleague Søren's baby. I think one thing was that we didn't think about having a sustainable business model. And that was really hard. And I think there came a time where we kind of had to decide whether or not we wanted to continue that venture. And if we did, we probably had to take it into a different context and think differently about how you build these kind of programs. So I think we should have thought about that earlier. I have to say that we built Scale It around the same time that like the Y Combinators of the world were being built. So it wasn't like that there was a proven model for how to help startups at that time. It was sort of work in progress. But I think we learned a lot in that.
Right.
Yeah.
Very, very, very new. I mean, again, so we always talk about like, how one of the things that we focus on at SuperVenio is, when we bring clients in, is to really avoid all these pitfalls that we have learned over the years. And it's there's so many of them that you go in, like what we talked about, the commitment that you have to commit to the territory. You bring somebody in, go and find the people that know the right people within their network. Don't start with somebody just because they're a heck of a lot cheaper. I have done it myself. I've made those mistakes, and they cost you not just time, but the lost opportunities over the years. It's excruciatingly painful to companies. They want to save a few bucks a month, and then they don't get the right guy with the right network. And if you want to raise capital, you gotta know somebody that knows the right people, and not even just the VCs. I mean, I can go down the street here to Sand Hill, and you can do it the same. We can knock on doors and get meetings set up, but find the right VCs for the right technologies and the right people, right? Because you also have to match chemically. So there's a lot more to that. But
and you will sort of like, you have to like, that's going to take a long time, and you're going to kiss a lot of frogs before you find that right person, right? So that's also why the network is so important, and it has to be vast, and you have to have the right people involved. And that's something we didn't talk about, but we talked about that earlier, Jens, about how that it's also super important that you sort of understand that you need to invest in the people around you as well. And sometimes that means that you have to bring them into your company, right? So it's there are many things that are different here.
Yeah, it's definitely a big undertaking, but be prepared, come over, do the right things, take the right steps. And obviously we've done that for so long.
Yeah, and reach out to Jens, he'll help you.
Say that again?
Reach out to you, you'll help. You
yeah,
have the
absolutely.
experience.
That's what we're here for at SuperVenio, of course. How are we on time, Ken? Is it back to you and Jonas, or do we have time for a few questions, if any?
I think it is about time to head over to Jonas, but hold on, you got 5 more minutes. Go ahead, my man.
Wow.
Perfect. So we can continue then. So, but any question from the audience?
I'm happy to shoot one quick one while people are typing on their keyboards, though, Lena. In terms of committing and going there, and I know you've settled a family in San Francisco now. On a more personal level, because that's where I like to operate, is, what does it mean, for your roots and for your family, and what kind of deliberations are in the picture there from a personal standpoint going over?
Yeah, there are many. I think I've created my family here, so in a sense that has been easy for me, right? But I've definitely seen many people that have had families that had to relocate here, and I honestly think that may be one of the biggest barriers to coming here and actually to doing it, because it's just not easy, like, to convince, if you're the founder of a company, you have to convince how many, like 3-4 other people to just come join you and jump into this. And especially in a place where we are from, where both adults in a relationship are having their own career, right? So that it's not always easy just to uproot and come here and take that leap. But I will say that when you decide to do so, this may be one of the better places in the world to come, right? Because it's an extremely international and diverse community here, and people come here for years at a time or come or stay, which means that there's always, like, the whole family is relatively easy for them to sort of establish their own network and also create a life here. I think that's one of the blessings that could be hard on many other places around the world, for sure.
We have 2 questions in the chat. One is from Rosa Kebia, Any recommendations to startups in the service industry? And I also have one from Yamit. How would you address the different states in terms of markets and specific ecosystems? So one is about startups from the service industry, and another one is the different states. So I've been to about 40 of the states, and they're pretty much all the same. They're all got a, no, well, you can't find White Castle everywhere. But and Piggly Wiggly is also, not in all places. But other than that, it's pretty bland, isn't it? So no, but you can take whatever question first.
Yeah. Talking about the states, so I have to admit that I haven't sort of worked in all of those states. I think there's one thing I can sort of discuss is whether or not like East Coast or West Coast, right, is something you have to consider. And of course we are proponents of West Coast because we are here and there are many opportunities here. There's a big innovation ecosystem here, but there are challenges. There's the time difference, and I think that may be one of the biggest challenges that there are no overlap in your work days. Like someone who you're having a meeting with in Europe, for instance, have to sort of be on that call almost outside of their work hours. So that is one thing for sure. And I think when you talk about states, and I may also look a little bit differently at companies in general, because I'm sort of more thinking the Silicon Valley way of building companies, right? Like you are sort of conquering, you want to become a market leader, so you sort of operate a little bit at a time. And I would assume for most products, that first market that you'll succeed in is probably not Kansas. So in that sense, that may not be so much what you have to think about. You have to find the right customers from the beginning on that can sort of set you on that trajectory to become popular eventually in Kansas, right? So I think that I think about that a little bit differently than sort of entering each state in that sense.
That's because you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz.
Sorry?
That's because you haven't seen The Wizard of Oz. Here, everything happens in Kansas.
Well, yeah. Who knew? Yeah.
Well, I think
Vegas.
The point being that definitely differences between it. Silicon Valley is Silicon Valley. It's trying to been duplicated. Los Angeles and in Arizona, in the East Coast, Boston, Chicago, but it is Silicon Valley. So there's definitely some differences here.
And there was another question around service, and I'm not sure I'm fully equipped to answer that, but I assume when you talk services, it's something around sort of a process or a way of doing things, and of course that have to be adapted, right? Like there's probably cultural components to that as well, or correct me if I'm wrong if you mean something else by service, but.
Well, I can say maybe as a context in Europe, we have the EU Service Directive. And that has taken a long time to negotiate, because what is a service? If you are selling lifeboats from Viking lifeboats in Esbjerg, that's just about a service, and in teaching the staff on a boat how to save their passengers or how to keep the lifeboat afloat all the time and up to date. So is there such a, could you consider a service, especially digital services? Is there like a one legal framework for them, or would you say that there are certain services that have certain states that are more easy or more difficult to access from a service startup point of view?
Honestly, I don't think I'm the right person to answer that, but I will say that everything is a service today, right? Like there's nothing that we sell here in Silicon Valley that's not a service. So I may sort of not be sort of the same mindset I'm in around what a service is that you do, but everything like software today is a service, infrastructure is a service. So yeah, everything is a service.
I'll wrap up a quick one on that one before we wrap it up. It's the good old Vestas model, right? You sell the windmills and you make money on servicing them. So never make a product better than you can live off the service.
That's a bit sad, but maybe partly true.
But that leads us on with the next one. Thank you very much, Lena and Jens, for
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lena. Good to have you.
Thank you for having me.
So if you go ahead and you sell a product and the service might not live up to the user's experience, it's probably a good idea to have a great attorney by your side And luckily, we do have a great attorney by our side tonight. We have Jonas Mølgaard Mikkelsen from Sync, a Danish attorney company, here to tell you much more about how to set up your company in the US, raising capital, should you even raise capital from American investors. So please, a warm welcome to Jonas.
Hi, Ken. Thank you. And hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. As Ken just said, my name is, oh, something happened with my screen here. Just a second. Yes, I'm a lawyer working with the Sync law firm here in Denmark. We are a law firm specialized in tech-focused companies. And we often advise our Danish clients, our Scandinavian clients, about how they should get established in the US. So what I would talk about today is how you can do a market entry into the US. And I'll of course cover the boring stuff, the legal stuff, and the things you have to consider when going to the US. And Eduardo, I hope that you are with me because you have my presentation, so hopefully you can follow.
I have. Yes, you're ready.
Perfect. And if we go down, then I had a little agenda, so you can see what we are going through today. First of all, different kind of market entries. Then I will talk a little about employees and how to handle this when going to the US. Something about IP rights, which is very important, especially for our clients, which are digital businesses. Then something about finance and investments. And lastly, I will talk a little about tax, which I actually don't know anything about. So hopefully we will be able to go around this within the time we have. So market entry. There are different kind of ways to do the market entry. And if you move to the next slide, Eduardo, these are ways that you can consider for your entry. And of course, you have to consider the purpose. One way to entry, and actually the most used way to do it, is direct sales from an entity in Denmark. And that can be a direct sale of services or products directly from Denmark. It's probably the easiest way to get started. But it can have huge tax implications if you do it the wrong way, because you can be considered to be established in the US. Another way is to establish a branch office, in Danish, in filial. But again, here you have to be aware, because you can have a situation where you unintentionally create a business presence in the US, although you would like to avoid that, because then you will be the Danish company can't be taxed under tax liabilities under US law. A third way to go is to establish a subsidiary owned by the Danish or Scandinavian entity. This is not very costly. In some states, it's almost for free. And it's not costly to operate as well. Subsidiaries is a good idea if you want to avoid any liabilities in your parent company in Denmark, because then you have a legal entity in the US. And it can also make sure that the parent company will not be subject to US taxes, state taxes. Another great advantage here is that the company will have a physical presence in the US, which is very important. We often see that our clients which succeed when flip their businesses to the US is the one with the physical presence. The most effective way to go to enter the market is actually to do a total flip where the US company that you establish become the parent company and then the subsidiary in Denmark. And that is because the US investors, is what we see, they really like to invest in the company who owns all the IP rights. So if you're searching for investors, or if you're most important or strategic customers, they are based in the US, then it's a good idea to do it like this. No matter which way you consider to entry, the most important thing, and one of the most important thing, is to be aware of tax issues, and including transfer pricing, if you are having agreements between your companies in the US and in Scandinavia. Moving on, if you other considerations you have to do and you have to be mindful of is how to handle employees, how to handle your IP, how to handle tax, how to handle insurance and product liability, which is a different world in the US than we know from Denmark, at least. Now I will look into employees, and afterwards I will say something about IP rights, and lastly I will say something about taxes. The main thing to be aware of in relation to employees is that if you have an entity which employs US workers or is about to employ US workers, then I will recommend that you have a US entity, because then you will have a taxable presence in the US. This also means that the US entity will be the actual employer of the US workers. And of course, a US entity will also prepare your business for investments. You have to keep in mind and probably also get some advice in regards to the registrations you have to do with the authorities. And we, for example, always recommend for our clients that they outsource many different tasks, including tasks related to payrolls, and then they make an agreement with a professional payroll service provider. And of course, you need to have all relevant employment agreements, handbooks, etc. in place for all your employees. I'm moving on to the IP rights. Thank you, Eduardo. This is actually the core thing for a lot of our customers, which are digital businesses. And when they go into the US, we always say that it's very important that you ensure that your IP is also protected under US law as well. And I have stated some examples. It could be trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, or patents. And as in Denmark, you will have to register, for example, trademarks and patents with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and copyrights you will have to register with the US Copyright Office. So it's actually the same procedure as we know from Denmark, some way down the road. If you make any IP agreements or any arrangements using your IP in the US, and this is not the same as in Denmark, because in the US we actually recommend that these agreements, they have clauses where your counterparties, they actually agree that your IP belongs to your company, and that the counterparty cannot, actually we say that they cannot file any IP registrations regarding IP which is similar to your IP, to make sure that they cannot use your IP in any way. And it is my advice that if you are going to the US and you have a digital business, that you are very aware of the IP situation and that you get the necessary advices and get the right protection from the beginning. The next thing is about raising capital in the US, how this can be structured. And as you probably know, all of you, there is more capital in the US than anywhere else in this world, at least as the situation is in Denmark. And the key thing here is to be aware of that every time you need to raise capital, it takes planning and it takes good preparation. And when you do this planning, you should at least consider how you are identifying your investors or possible investors, because investing is actually a numbers game, and it is my experience that it takes many meetings and long nights and introductions before you have a match and you find the right investor for you, which are ready to commit. We have also experienced that local presence is very important, and my personal experience is that it is almost impossible to be successful without local presence, and you have to commit and go in full. And that's because if you establish a local presence, it also signals to the investors that you are ready for financing and you're also ready to do business locally. When I talk to my clients, I also often advise them to find an advisor who is experienced with fundraising and who can, because the US is quite different to the Danish investor scene. So I also advise them to find an advisor who can, I don't know how to say that, Americanize the pitch and also participate in meetings. One other thing is to make the investors comfortable, and my best advice is to prepare a clean deal, which means a straightforward cap table, no shady pasts, which can be difficult for most of us, and of course you should know your team and the team's background. If we look into the key legal issues in relation to establish or enter the US market, it is our experience that raising capital can take many days. It can take more than 100 days because from normally when we see our clients are pitching for investors until they receive a term sheet, there's normally goes around 45 days or something like that. And once the parties have agreed on the term sheet, it usually takes 50 days more to complete the due diligence and do the final investments agreements. It's not only my recommendation, but when we talk to the US investors, they often insist that you have established a US corporation. And they will also normally require that the IP rights is owned by this US entity. Sometimes we advise our customers to establish an entity in the US from the beginning and then just transfer the IP rights, because if you do it from the beginning, the price will be lower. And then you just have a clawback mechanism which ensure that you can always buy the IP back to the Danish entity if you do not succeed with getting the necessary capital in the US. I would also like to say something about venture capital, because this is also one of the things that we do quite a lot. And what we see now is that there are two overall ways of receiving investments. There is the equity, where the investors are subscribing new shares in your company, and this is normally at a fixed agreed price between the parties. And then there is the convertible securities, which is the other way, meaning that the investment amount will eventually convert into equity. We have a lot of seed and early stage companies, startups, and they often use convertible securities such as Y Combinator, safe documents, which is some kind of a market standard for getting into the market. Investors in later stage startups will more commonly invest in priced equity rounds where the price is fixed. And this all go down to the valuation question, which can be quite difficult, especially if you are a startup. It will be easier to do the valuation later on, because normally the valuation of an early stage startup actually just describe the amount that the founders and the investors can agree upon. we always tell our clients that there are some things they or events that they should be aware of which can impact the valuation. And again, one of them is that do you own your own IP, which of course will increase the valuation. Are you sure you have the right time when presenting your case or the investment case for the investors? How is the company's progress? If it's good, it will of course normally lead to an increase in valuation. It could be that you're already selling your products in Denmark and you are just about to do the same in the US. Are there any company challenges which will of course decrease the valuation? And then of course, if there is a new price equity round or an IPO or something like that, then you will normally have a fixed valuation, which will determine the market value. Tax, my best advice here is to get a very good and experienced and international tax advisor, because there are many situations that you have to be aware of. And as I said in the beginning, it's possible to unwittingly become US tax subjects if you establish some activities on the US market. For example, the branch office or sales representative. And I always recommend that before entering into the US, you do a review of the tax implications to avoid expensive pitfalls, and start with that before anything else. And of course, be aware of that there are several registrations that you need to do, and you can't be under a requirement to do tax registrations in more than one state. And the last thing I will say about tax is regarding to executives. So if you have executives which are moving to the US, there are several traps, and that can result in serious consequences or penalties for the executives. So it's very important that you settle them correctly from the beginning. And that was actually it, Ken. I don't know if there's any questions to this.
I think we can have a one or two questions before while people are typing. Thank you very much, Jonas. First of all, it's a rough topic, but nonetheless one that will make or break your company. That's for sure. Everything from making sure the founders are on the same page, all the agreements are ready. All the way to actually negotiating the terms. So that might be my first question. Like, what do you see as the most important aspect while fundraising or determining the valuation of the company?
I think the most important thing is to focus on what is important for you. And to make a good process and to find the right investor, because sometimes the valuation shouldn't be the decisive part. It's a part of the decision that you're going to make, but you have to find the right investor. We have said several of our clients have closed down their businesses in the US because they chosen the wrong investor and get a high valuation instead. Yeah. It's also very important to take out the focus areas that you have early and get the deal closed as quickly as possible, because then you can get back to the important thing, which is how you're growing the company. Yeah. And the last thing important, I think is important is in relation to the term sheet, which many forget is actually a binding agreement often. And so if you just sign a term sheet with an investor, then the terms will be binding afterwards. And it's very difficult for a lawyer to do anything to help you because you already have binding terms. Yeah,
and I remember one of the early things I learned was it's easier to get a divorce than it is to get rid of a bad partner. Yeah. So, we got one good question here from the audience, Jonas. With all the complexities of these things and all the considerations, what kind of price tag are you looking at as a startup who's eyeing the American market as a potential setup?
It of course depends on the way you want to do the market entry. So if you make it a direct sales from a Danish entity, for example, it's not that expensive. Normally, you could enter the market for around 50,000 Danish crowns. But if you have to establish a subsidiary or do a flip of your Danish entity, the costs, they're normally between 200 and 500,000 Danish crowns in legal fees and fees to advisors on both sides.
Yeah, which does sound expensive, but I have to say from personal experience as well, the cost is one of the things that you worry about a lot as a founder, because you're looking at the bank and you're looking at the months disappearing, and 500,000 Danish kroner can be a lot of months of your runway disappearing. But not doing the things correctly will be a life or death situation, and then it's game over. So you have to think a lot about the investment that it is that you're putting into the company, even though it seems like large price tags. I think, oh man, we've had a lot of stories. We can, if we ever get together over a beer in the group, I can share a lot of great stories about the costs of not doing it. I think you, Jonas, at one point looked at us and said, well, guys, that went pretty well. You can look at this as your learning money, and at least you got out of it quite.
Exactly.
That was very early on in our day. So I want to say to Inga on the question about the price tag, it is a relevant question. Of course, the money needs to be there, but it should be planned into the growth of the company, that when you're ready for that step, the price tag should really be the least of the worries.
Yeah.
All right.
That's also, sorry, Ken, that's also important in relation to the claims that can come when entering the US market. So you really have to consider this also in relation to insurances and stuff like that. So you are covered when entering.
Yeah.
It's true. It's not in many countries where you have to put on printer cartridges that this product isn't edible.
Yeah, I think Johan can talk a lot about that topic as well, in terms of what kind of protections the retailers want to see for a product. I remember a term I had never heard before called an umbrella insurance, that basically covers everything for your product, from what happens if the ship that transports it from China sinks and your rubber ducks are spread all around the world.
That sounds like a good plan there.
Yeah.
We have about 3 minutes left, so if there are any questions left for Jonas,
let's have a look.
Or for Jens and Ken, our great partners from SuperVenio. If you have any questions for Ken or Jens or for Jonas, we have about 3 minutes left.
I think one question for Jonas as well is about the timing of approaching the company. You said sometimes you advise companies to set up directly. I can think of one specific Danish case where they went completely past the stage of setting up in Denmark and went directly to America and set up and became a very successful database company. What advice do you have on timing for beginning to approach investors, specifically in the US? Where should you be, sort of?
The easy answer is when you're prepared to do so, Ken. No, the most important thing, in my opinion, is that you have the right team, because the investors are investing in the team, often not in the business. Of course, they also do that, but it is the team that is the driven factor. And I also think that you ought to have the legal structure in place, and you shouldn't approach investors before this is in place. Then there's, of course, is a question about valuation. It's clear that the valuation will be higher if you have a product on the market that you are ready to sell. So I would probably advise you to go as far as you can without receiving any investments, and take them in when you need to. A little before in time, because it can take some time to receive the investments.
A personal note there is always have a plan B.
Yeah.
And a plan C.
Yeah.
It comes and goes. Hey,
Yeah.
one quick question that I have. So Jonas, one of the things I did with a couple of Danish companies that, when they have to flip, so instead of flipping, we found the methodology of basically adding a 5%, we would buy and sell the IP basically, or the products in the US. So add a 5% cost on top of everything, and then we'll do that. We'll pay the tax to the US for the 5%, and obviously the rest are gone to Denmark, and that way avoid some of that tax hassle that can come along the way where you get double taxed, for instance.
Yeah.
Is that something you see a lot today? Is it something from the past, or is it?
Actually, I haven't been involved in a structure like that. I'm so sorry, Jens, but so I don't see it often. Then I see you approach the market in another way instead of doing this. But is it something you see all the time, or
so
I'd like to know more about how this is structured?
Yeah, so we did it in order because one of the things that I found that Danish companies or several foreign companies have a hard time with is letting go of equity. So when they start flipping, they lose control to some extent, start feeling they're losing control of the equity. So they want to stay within their own country. And instead, you set you up more or less as a distributor of their product. But they do incorporate in the United States, and we did like a Delaware corporation and foreign entity into California, and then we did the 5% plus to the product, and so you did not have the tax ramifications of both countries. So the U.S. only claimed the 5%, and the rest went to Denmark, and therefore they clarified it and didn't have the risk of getting overly taxed.
Yeah. And thinking about it, we actually did a structure for one of our former clients called Mobile Industrial Robots, where we actually did that. And the story is that the American investor afterwards bought the Danish entity. And they are, you probably know the story about Teradyne, which are now very present in Denmark and in Odense. And that they actually approach the market as you described, more or less as you described it there.
Yeah.
For all of you who find this conversation really interesting, I encourage you to join thisis.cbnet.com, where we will continue to have focus on market access for different countries, including, of course, the US. We're not done with an hour and a half on US market access. There's much more to talk about and to learn. So I think we should wrap up here, Jens and Ken.
Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you again to everybody for some great talks. But I want to wrap a quick word on sort of what it is that Jens and I are trying to do here together with Rasmus and the team at CBN is exactly put this kind of network effect into play for all of the startups that want to go into the US. Bringing in people like Johan, like Jonas, like Lene and the network all around. As a founder, in my experience, you want to try and learn and do everything yourself. And this goes back to my first point, as the most important thing is have respect for your own time. Don't spend it on polishing the windows when you should be focusing what it is that you are absolute the best at doing, and then have a network around you that can help you out. And that's, in the long run, is really going to make the things a lot easier for you.
Back to where we started today. Network is everything. It is such a big entity, and Lene was attesting to that when she teaches entrepreneurship.
We have some great comments in the chat, but we won't have time to read them all, and it will just be self-laudatory, I guess it's called. But thank you, Jens and Ken, but also thank you, Johan, Lene, and Jonas. Lene, I will get back to you because we have this Creative Business Academy all over Africa and Europe, and sometimes when this Saturday we had someone calling from Ghana, and we kept getting falling out. Like, before Elon Musk takes over internet access globally with Skylinks, I think we need to give Bluetown a head start. So I'll get hold of you
We do a lot of work in Ghana, so just let us know. We'll be there.
Fantastic, but it's all over the world, actually, all over the world. So we can actually catapult you onto some 80 countries by a couple of clicks. But anyway, thank you to all of you, to Jonas, Lena, Johan, Kenneth, and Jens, and to all of you participating in this Taking Your Creative Startup to the US. We'll be back, not after these messages, but we'll be back in the near future with more webinars and more stuff for you to help you thrive as a startup. So thanks a lot to everyone. Tuck. And see you again.
Thank you, and Tuck, for everyone joining.